It's a tough gospel. This is tough to even talk about. So first of all, in the gospel, the two examples talk about calculating the cost of something. And you know the examples. If you're going to remodel your house, we'll first calculate the cost to see whether you have enough money and so on to complete the job. So the message, therefore, is, have we ever seriously calculated what it takes to be a disciple of Jesus? Most of us probably were born as cradle Catholics. That's how I'm here. Made sense, so I keep following it. But the problem is, at least as I see it, and you don't have to agree with me, that organized religion over 20 centuries has come up with a very watered-down version of the message of Christ. And that's what we follow. Last week I talked about, on this side of the spectrum is our human nature, with all of our human selfish tendencies, things that we say make sense. And on this side of the spectrum is the message of Jesus. Today's gospel. Who does not give up all their possessions cannot be my disciple. Does that make sense? No. And so where on the spectrum are we? We have accepted and we live a very watered down version of the gospel. Now, if you want to examine yourself, I'm not going to do it for you. Have you ever read a gospel from beginning to end? I'm not talking about in one sitting, but over some time. Most Catholics have never read one of the Gospels. So how do you know what you're getting into? You haven't calculated the cost. That's the first challenge. Find out really what Jesus teaches, and then we will know what is expected of us. Now, I humbly confess, I've read all the Gospels many times. I still don't follow them. I pick and choose what I think makes sense for me, but not the totality of the gospel. I don't give up all my possessions. Now, by the way, in the gospel, whoever comes to me and does not hate, that's a bad translation, because the scripture doesn't say hate, because hate is an emotion and hate takes energy. If you hate somebody, that takes energy. The real good translation would be, whoever does not prefer less their father, mother, spouse, than me is not worthy of me. Because the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. It's indifference. So where do we stand as accepting the true message of Jesus? Do you live any differently than other people because we are a Christian? This is a time of examination. Do you get rid of anything in your life because you're a disciple of Jesus? How do you live differently? Do you have a different point of view than others? Do you have different assumptions, different biases? Because we are a disciple of Jesus. Now, some of you know the name Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a Lutheran German pastor during the reign of Adolf Hitler. And he organized a social action group to oppose the Nazis. Because of that, he was imprisoned, and on, I think it was April 9th, 1945, right before the end of the war, he was executed. Now, he wrote a book called The Cost of Discipleship, which was published after he died, but he talks about cheap grace and costly grace. And he maintained that most Christians live cheap grace, my version of the gospel. He said that most Christians do not live a costly grace, which means the cross. So today we have the example in the second reading of Philemon, slaves. And that has many levels. That's what I'm always talking about in Scripture. Who are the modern slaves? We still have them. those underemployed, immigrants, other races, nationalities, you could name it. You figure it out. And by the way, Paul did not address the issue of slavery. It took society over 1,900 years, in the United States at least, to abolish slavery. And by the way, any change of moral values takes long time. And if you want to know it, we're right in the midst of the abortion debate. This is not going to be settled just with the Supreme Court. It's going to take years before this is settled. Think about what we are enslaved to as we struggle with this spectrum. Are we not enslaved by our possessions or our comfort or our security, our privilege, our power? That enslaves us. And that's what the cross will free us from. Now, that's what we're challenged to think about today. We all have examples of people who really understood the message of Jesus and took it seriously. We call them saints. Think about St. Francis of Assisi, who took the cross. He stripped himself naked, gave his clothes to his Father, and he went off and followed the vision of Jesus according to his understanding of the gospel. That's our challenge. Can you think about it? Bishop Ignatius of Antioch in the year 110 was in prison in Rome. He wrote a letter back to the church of Antioch, and he praised the bishop of Ephesus. And he said, "Follow that man. He's filled with the love of God. He understands the cross." The bishop's name was Onesimus. Could it have been the same slave?